Thanks, Nick. Good evening, everyone. I'm Don, and the title speaks for itself. Dyckman Oval, how the Kingsbridge Athletics built a ballpark that changed baseball history. And this is sort of like when you have kids, you're responsible for creating them, and they're very, very early years, and then at some point they leave and have a life of their own. And so this stadium started because of a Kingsbridge team, and then it took on a life of its own. And let's see, how long does it take to change slides? I want to change slides. If I click on it, all right, that's what I'll do. All right, so we're going to see six big teams here. The Kingsbridge Athletics, this is the like timeline, lead into a team called the Treatham Roughs and into Jeff Testro's Bears, into the Atlantic City Backrack Giants, the New York Cubans, and the Black Yankees. And the story ends in 1938. Babe Ruth in 1920 said about this ballpark, the right field wall of this park is so close in that if you don't knock a line drive straight to the fielder, you're pretty near bound to bunt a home run. And the New York Amsterdam News says it is Alex Pompus's beautiful miniature stadium. Larry Hogan in Shades of Glory called the stadium a gathering place for Harlemites, separated from the indignities of racialized treatment, a place of their own to celebrate their own. And it's about a mile, just over a mile as the crow flies from here to the southeast, just like Van Cortlandt Park is about a mile and a quarter to the northeast from Edge Hill, where we are. So if you were to walk it, it takes longer because there's no direct way, no straight line path. But it's bounded by Academy Street and 204th and Nagle Avenue and 10th Avenue. Why did a Kingsbridge team end up there? It's just the beginning of this story. And the ballpark was built by the Kingsbridge Athletics, and it became an important part of baseball history because of its association with Black professional baseball. And the Hall of Famers will go through the list. It's an extensive list. But the former Rube Foster, former player and owner of the Chicago American Giants, played in this neighborhood quite a few times because of the Oval. And the Oval's proximity to the number one train meant that Harlemites could get there very easily to the Dyckman Street station. And then John Connor, the owner of the Backrack Giants, and Alex Pompez, the owner of the New York Cubans, credited for inventing and developing the Dominican Republic pipeline of baseball talent into today's MLB. And he was a scout for the New York Giants later in his career. But first, we got to start in the neighborhood. And here's a great article that Nick sent to me about a friendly match being played at Spuyten Duyvil in August of 1865 between the Greenberg team of Dobbs Ferry and the Uncas team of Spuyten Duyvil. And Headley Field, or Gaelic Park, at 242nd Street and Broadway. This great article in the New York Times from 1914 of train workers competing against each other, the IRT team versus the Subway Giants. In the Interborough Brooklyn Rail, I don't know what, I can't remember it. Anyway, in a baseball war. And a little personal connection here. I have to show it, Peter. Pete Ostrander's grandfather, this guy, George Endlich, was the player coach of the Anoka Cubs in around 1918. And these are clippings that the family saved about games that they played. The Anoka Cubs defeated the crack Bronx Triangle Athletic Club of Bronx Church by the score of 6-5 in 10 innings. And this is amazing. This is the 17th straight victory of the Anoka Cubs of the season. So that sounds like a pretty hot team. Here's some photos from the neighborhood. You can see the IRT here. So that's 242nd Street. This is in Inwood. That's a future photographer, William Gray Hassler, on an Inwood field. So let's get oriented, and then we'll talk about, we'll start getting into the history. So we are in Inwood. If you're from out of the state or something, we're north of Harlem, we're north of Washington Heights. And the ball field now is on the grounds of the public housing called the Dyckman Houses. So this is the extent of the ball field, and there the extent of the stands, and you can see the infield highlighted in 2018. So we're going to get into detail and try to find home plate at the end of the talk. Hall of Famers who played here, quite a list. Not only baseball Hall of Famers, football Hall of Famers, and even a cricket Hall of Famer. So Babe Ruth played there 3 times. Lou Gehrig played there. And I mean, you name it. And it was part of a satellite network of semi-pro and pro stadiums. The big black dots are the major league stadiums from that time, Hilltop Park, the Polo Grounds, and later the Yankee Stadium, the proposed American League Stadium. We'll talk about that. And here's Inwood, the Dyckman Oval, and then a lot of semi-pro fields, the Bronx Oval, Catholic Protectorate Oval, Harlem Oval, Olympic Field, New York Oval. This is where part-time professional players played, and as well as total pros for MLB. So it all sort of started to click when the subway arrived in 1906. This empty neighborhood of Spuyten Duyvil, Marble Hill, Kingsbridge, and Inwood was perfect for sports and perfect because of the #1 trade. You could be living down in that crowd. You could live on Orchard Street or way down in the village, and on weekends take the subway uptown for your games. And you can even see here this newspaper article: the subway carries the crowds from the Lower East Side to the vacant lots extending northward from Dyckman Street. Thousands of men and boys go to these places every Sunday to play baseball. And the American League took note of the subway's popularity. When the Hilltop Park lease at 168th Street was expiring after the 1912 season, the Highlander/Yankee, they were going to be the Yankees later, secured a site uptown at 225th Street. So the target is here, and here's the Broadway Bridge. So Marble Hill, you can see the shape of it, and 230th Street. So this is the new Yankee Stadium proposed site. Oh, and you can even see a bit of the velodrome here. Yeah, it looks like it has already burned down because part of it, that looks intact, but not that, just a footprint of it. So the Highlanders had played at Hilltop Park between 1903 and 1912. They were called that because Washington Heights, it's high, it's the high ground. And it was sort of a hastily built thing. They wanted to build a better stadium and be right near, here's the layout of the park in the 1914 Sanborn Atlas. So you can see it's where the Marble Hill houses are now. The public housing for Marble Hill houses are right here. And the newspapers had architect drawings. 1913 New York Times says the work for filling in the site for the new baseball grounds has been going on slowly for about 2 years. The Yankees' new park is going to hold 40,000 fans. Here we can see Broadway and the entrance into the stadium, and exterior street over here. But in 1915, the team had been sold to owners of Rupert and Houston. Tillinghast Huston and Jacob Rupert, they hated that site. They wanted a different site. And so work on this stadium was scrapped after 1915. But it had already sent ripples throughout the semi-pro community, and teams were already looking for new places, since the Yankees were probably going to crowd people out, they thought. So seeking refuge in Inwood, the Kingsbridge Athletics were looking for other places that may not be where thousands of Yankee fans are going to be crowding them all the time. So this was owned originally by Isaac Michael Dyckman. Here's Sherman's Creek. This is Dyckman Street, or 200th, and the Harlem River. And here's the site. You can see that it is on the tidal lands, so it's going to be inundated partly by tides twice a day. And the oval is built on these 5 real estate lots adjacent to Sherman Creek and kind of swampy, marshy land, which eventually started to be bulkheaded in and dried out. Academy Street was improved, and so it had to be dry enough for a street to go there. So by 1897, engineers were starting to dry out the property. And during the course of this whole stadium, you can see that the neighborhood between 1912 and 1930 kind of fills in. The yellow is the Dyckman Oval, and the neighborhood was just barely built in 1912. But by 1930 and by 1938, when the field was closed, the neighborhood was pretty full. And you can see by the population in Inwood, 7,000 up to 50,000 in 1940. So it kind of was sort of a prescient to get their land, lease their land before all the apartment buildings happened. All right, Dyckman Oval Baseball Part 1. It's in 2 parts tonight. Here's our Dyckman Oval in 1914. Real estate development going through the roof. Local teams are scrambling to lock in their home fields. And so here we can see that's Nagle Avenue with the #1 train heading north. 204th Street, heading up towards the Dyckman House. You can see that there, and Inwood Hill Park in the distance. And what looks like an infield being dried out. And if you really take a look, you can still see there's cattails and marshy water, but they've been filling in the infield here. And in 1915, here's this very early press release, a very early article in the New York Press about a Dyckman Oval contest, sometimes called Dyckman Field, sometimes called Dyckman Oval. But the Kingsbridge Athletics, who went through the season last year with a splendid record, will pry off the lid of their new home grounds, Dyckman Oval, tomorrow. So between 1914 and 1915, this field would have been made playworthy. And here's our 1914 Kingsbridge Athletics team. These would have been the first guys to play there. And famously, a major leaguer, Andy Coakley. He had played for the Philadelphia Athletics, Cincinnati Reds, and Chicago Cubs, and the Highlanders in 1911. And he was also, became the baseball coach at Columbia for like 30 years. And he was Lou Gehrig's head coach the one season he was there. So he was a pitcher for the Kingsbridge Athletics. And here in 1917, they're actually making they're leasing that land. Work will begin in a few days on the erection of grandstands, and the lessee, the owner, Cornelius Savage, is the manager of the Kingsbridge Athletics, or the person taking out the lease. So the Brooklyn Daily Eagle says that the Kingsbridge Athletics actually are formally going to use this park. And in April, it was fenced. According to the New York Sun, Dyckman Oval has been fenced off and a grandstand built for the coming baseball season. The inauguration of the new field is scheduled for Sunday. And the Dyckman Oval is situated within a stone's throw of the Dyckman Street subway station, which was really going to be its calling card to bring people up from downtown. And they talk about who's going to be pitching, the major leaguer Roy Morse, former Giants star George Brown. And here we can actually see some bleachers that had been built, and a left field and right field sort of wall. Doesn't look like there's a fence. Maybe that is a fence. It's hard to say what's in the outfield, but I don't think it's completely built. Compared to Yankee Stadium, you can see why Babe Ruth was saying you could bunt a home run to center field, because Yankee Stadium is twice as deep in center field. But in left and right field, it's comparable. So Yankee Stadium in 1928 was 301 on the left field baseline and 295 on the right field baseline, so actually 30 feet shorter, but 490 feet all the way out to center field. And the Dyckman Oval, you can see the fence, only 265 feet. I measured this with a Google measuring tool. Alex Pompez, he would later use this as their home field, played their first game there in 1917. So getting introduced to the stadium, It's a brand new ballpark in a well-established sort of tradition of ballparks. Um, and as you go through the newspaper articles, it's amazing to see who played there. Every time there's a Hall of Famer, you'll see his plaque. So Chief Bender, probably the first Hall of Famer to play at the Oval. Here he is on the bill in October of 1917. Most of these major leaguers, if their career isn't over, they're barnstorming. So Chief Bender will be barnstorming. Probably the season is over for his team. What's amazing is that he's a Native American, and he popularized the slider. He called it the nickel curve in his day. He was one of the early converts to really use that pitch regularly. And he was a member of 3 World Series winning teams.
Is that a Cooperstown plaque?
Yeah, that's what you'll see if there's a Hall of Famer. And here we can see Major League Baseball's New York Giants barnstorming at the Oval after the season ends against the Philadelphia Giants, a black team. So often it was not uncommon for white teams to play black teams. It was the integration on a team that was uncommon. So here we can see the 1918 New York Giants playing the Philly Giants. I don't have a 1918 photo of their team. Hal Chase, who was one of the Black Sox, sounded like a really bad guy. He was accused of throwing games. He was fired from Cincinnati by Christy Mathewson. He was later a defendant in the 1919 Black Sox scandal, but was acquitted. Okay, and so after that 1918 season of the Kingsbridge Athletics, starting this whole thing of all these teams coming, realizing that there's this great stadium built by the Kingsbridge Athletics, I think they find a new home. And so they leave Ballpark, and Guy Empey, an actor slash celebrity, he takes over the lease. He had, during World War I, before the United States was in the war, he really wanted to fight. So he went to England and enlisted in the British military and fought and was wounded. And he came back to the United States and wrote a book about his story, which became a bestseller. That became a best-selling movie, and gave him money to buy a baseball club. So in 1919, he built it. He named his team the Treatham Roughs, and any proceeds would go towards buying artificial limbs for disabled World War I vets. So here you can see he's purchased, according to the Washington Herald, he's purchased the local Maroon Baseball Club, and hereafter that team will be known as the Treatham Roughs, which also has Kingsbridge connections. And John Connor, a black baseball owner from Brooklyn who had a team in Atlantic City, he signed to also play multiple games at the Dyckman Oval. And we can see in 1919, he played 12 games. His team, they played almost 40 games over 3 years, and at other places, Ebbets Field and Bronx Oval. So they were going to play against the Treatham Roughs. And what was amazing was that he could bring his team up from Atlantic City at all, because the king of the bush leaguers wanted to boss everybody around. And Nat Strong, for decades, controlled bookings, schedules, rosters, and payouts for the majority of semi-pro white and black baseball in New York City, because he had deals with all the ballparks. Dyckman Oval was a new ballpark. He hadn't really worked his way into there yet. So Connie Savage, who booked the ballpark at Dyckman Oval, he was still in control. He hadn't been pushed out. So this turned out that the Dyckman Oval was an opening for teams in the Midwest to come into the city, teams from other parts of the United States to come into the city. There's a lot of extra stuff here that we don't really need to know, but he was a bully. He monopolized ballparks, and we will see him again. But because the Dyckman Oval was open to out-of-town teams, it wasn't under the pressure of Nat Strong. All these great teams that people wanted to see, the Backrack Giants, the Chicago American Giants, These are really famous teams of top Black players who have an opportunity to play for a New York audience. And they're just a short ride away from Harlem on the subway. So the Chicago Defender says 30,000 people are willing to pay admission to see the American Giants and the Bacharachs hook up. And Nat Strong left town when Rube Foster's team came into town with his tail between his legs. He didn't show his face. But look at all these teams. And here comes trouble. MB's first really tough match is a doubleheader against the formidable 1919 Bacharach Giants with two Hall of Famers on their roster in July of 1919. And we happen to have this photo of the Dyckman Oval from that weekend. This is a postcard, and we can see the Hall of Fame, the New York University, Bronx Community College. So we know that this is Dyckman Oval, because that's right across the Harlem River. 18,000. This is a stadium that was made to hold a few thousand people, but 18,750 fans paid admission. So this was just a gigantic influx of fans wanting to see the Bacharach Giants. And 10,000 of these fans, according to the news, came from Harlem. And Bacharach Giants defeated the Treatham Roughs. The Treatham Roughs were a new team. Bacharach Giants, an established team, 6-0-8-4. So not really that competitive. And it really, really angered the owner. Guy Empey, this is something courtesy of Tom Mira, who's a member of the Kingsbridge Historical Society, and his grandfather, I believe, Charlie Mira, played on the Treatham Roughs that season. And here's a letter to him at 2918 Heath Avenue from Empey, and this is a letter carbon copied off to the whole team. The exhibition made by the team last Sunday, says Empey, was absolutely rotten. The team will drop its parlor tactics and play baseball, or the membership will be radically, promptly, and frequently changed. He was pissed, furious over the lopsided losses. But Charlie Mira held his own, and he writes back, this is another letter courtesy of Tom, that I feel, he says in reply, I feel sure that a glance at my record of the club will convince you that your letter was uncalled for. They were just a better team, the Bacharach Giants. Guy Empey, this is the very next day, so it's so interesting to get these two letters. This is July 31st, 1919. And on August 1st, the next day, Empey hired a new major league pitcher for his team, Jeff Tesreau. Jeff Tesreau, a longtime Giant. He was a starting pitcher for the New York Giants for 6 years, and he left partway through this 1918 season after an argument with manager John McGraw. And for the 1919 season, he was still under contract with the Giants, but he refused to play. He played for the Treatham Roughs instead, and McGraw refused to trade or release him. And so it was around this time that Jeff Tesreau, he was hired by Dartmouth. He became a longtime baseball coach, but for a few years, first he was on the Treatham Roughs, and then we'll see he had his own team here. So what's Guy Empey is doing is he's loading up on pitching. And Guy Empey welcomes the Harlem crowd. It was great business. 10,000 people, 13. So many people coming and paying. He announced that the Dyckman Oval would attempt to break Nat Strong's hold over NYC bookings and issued a statement about race. I believe in treating a man as a man, regardless of his color. Race Harlem is welcome to Dyckman Heights at all times. And he said that he will join hands with the Connors and Wilkins Company, those are the owners of the Bacharachs, to eliminate Nat Strong and other magnates from the control of Eastern semi-pro ball. He wanted quality baseball, not just the teams he was told to play. And so when Rube Foster, the Chicago, and his great Chicago team finally came to New York, 25,000 people came to the Dyckman Oval to see that. That's more people than were in the neighborhood, that lived in the neighborhood. On his team in 1919 were three Hall of Famers: Andrew Foster, the coach, Oscar Charleston, and Cristobal Torriente. Amazing. And then the next month, fresh from Boston, brand new Yankee Babe Ruth agrees to play one game, contracting himself for the Treatham Roughs. So the New York Sun says Babe Ruth was signed yesterday by Empey and will play in both games of that doubleheader against Wally Shank's American League players. So Ruth went on to play 15 seasons for the Yankees, and this is really kind of cool because he hadn't even played a game for the Yankees yet when he played at Dyckman Oval. He had been released from Boston. He was yet to start the season for the Yanks, and so he's just filling in. He's filling in his gigs. He's getting some work for the fall. Plays a day for the Treatham Roughs, and he gets a hit, but he doesn't get a home run. But Empey, he wanted to play with Babe Ruth, so he put himself in to pinch, and he pinch hit for a double and stole a base. But the Treatham Roughs lost both games to Wally Shang's All-Star team. Wally Shang had been a starting catcher for the Athletics and the Boston Red Sox, and then later for the Yankees. And oh gosh, yeah, I'm looking at this stuff. He was a switch hitter who batted above 300 6 times during his career. And in 1916, he became the first Major League Baseball player to hit a home run from both sides of the plate in the same game. And at the end of the season, 1919, the Treatham Roughs, their record got better and better. They won the 1919 New York City Semi-Pro Championship, defeating the Lincoln Giants at Dyckman Oval in front of 10,000 fans. And they hired Frankie Frisch for that game. He hit a home run in the second game. And I guess this is something that was not uncommon. You find a great player who's free on the day you have a game, and you just sign him for a one-day contract. Bring in a great major leaguer. And so building on the great results of that, Jeff takes over. And he bought the Treatham Roughs from Empey and renamed them after himself, Testro's Bears. And so he and the promoter, Connie Savage, are in control of Dyckman Oval. And they need to improve the stadium because sometimes 25,000 people show up. So they're going to enlarge it for the 1920 season, to say the least. It's needed, says the Chicago Defender. And it's hard for people to obtain seats. There aren't enough seats. The seats are uncomfortable. So they're trying to make it better. And here's this great photo from Tom Mira of his team, the 1920 Testro's Bears at Dyckman Oval. And you can tell it is because you can see Bronx Community College in the background again. And this is Jeff. They're not all named Jeff. In April, Ruth Foster visits New York City to arrange some bookings for the year, and he met with Tess Rowe and John Connor, and together they agreed again to bring Foster's Negro National League teams to play at New York City at the Dyckman Oval. And so the Defender says that Western teams under Rube's control will be sent to New York after June to play Dyckman Oval on Sundays and Saturdays. So this brings up another great season of Testro's Bears playing teams from outside of the city. All these great games. They become Harlem's favorites, the Bacharach Giants. In 1920, the New York Age says a good portion of the 110,000 souls living between 125th and 145th were all there. Doctors, blacks, bartenders, soldiers, sailors, and Sunday school teachers. Every Uptown Broadway express to reach Dyckman Street brought even more people who joined the seemingly endless stream that poured into the ballpark. Amazing. They must have liked it, or else he liked the money. And he came back for a second time in 1920. This is after his first season as a Yankee, after he had just hit 54 homers, which at that time was a new major league record. And he hit 2 homers in an exhibition game here at Dyckman Oval. He brought his own team this time. He wasn't playing for MP or Jeff. So the Dyckman Oval is actually getting noticed by the mayor, by politicians in 19, they want to go where people are and shake hands and be seen. So in May 1921, Mayor Ryland attends the game. He has to talk his way in because he didn't have a ticket, and the ticket guy didn't recognize him at first. And Jeff Tesreau sees him and says, "Hey, you want to throw out the first pitch?" And the Mayor Hyland, surprised everybody because he could really throw. He gave his right arm half a dozen revolutions and sent the ball over the plate with considerable speed. And so the headline, this is actually a fun headline: Mayor pitches ball, fans Cuban slugger. His Honor visits Dyckman Oval and makes good as a twirler. The Lincoln Giants defeat the barnstorming Major League New York Giants at the Oval after their season. Joe Williams strikes out 13 and defeats the barnstorming New York Giants 4-1. And on the New York Giants was George Kelly, Hall of Famer. One more season, and again, trying to get that field even better. A gang of men has been at work putting the famous grounds and the grandstand into condition. So they're going to open their 1921 season on April 10th. And we can see all the names of these players, but it's just great to see a team photo. And in this season, Lou Gehrig plays at the Oval. He takes a summer job at the Federal Sugar Company in Yonkers. He has a summer job after high school, before college, and he plays the Tesreau Bears. And anyway, here's his picture, and we can see, he says, summer 1921, Federal Sugar Company in Yonkers, New York. Lou Gehrig worked with me and played first base. We were both at Columbia University. And the winner of the winner of this, Tesreau's Bears versus Yonkers Sugar, was going to play the House of David team, a Jewish team, and they were very good, and they were taking on all comers. Mayor returns again, this time when Rube Foster was there and shakes Rube Foster's hand. The guest of honor at the American Giants back-rack Giants team last Sunday at Dyckman Oval was Mayor John. Again, shaking hands with Rube Foster and several of the visiting Chicago players. So it just seemed like everything was like going gangbusters. What was going to happen next year after all of the increases in attendance and great games at Dyckman Oval? Here we can see it on the municipal map in 1923. Doesn't quite go out to 10th Avenue in its smaller configuration with Nagel and Academy. What happened was baseball shuts down. Lawsuits, another Dyckman Oval tradition between the owners and the city. In 1921, New York City alleged that it owned the land that the Oval was built on because it had been inundated by the tides and New York City owned tidal land. So to avoid a legal battle, the current owners quickly and secretly sold the Oval to investors who planned to build a boxing arena. Conveniently, the new owners were not informed of the impending lawsuit. Anyway, the original lawsuit was awarded, New York City lost, and the Oval was actually owned by the people who operated it. But on appeal, the city won it back. Well, actually, that's backwards. The court awarded the Oval to NYC. And in 1924, the owners appealed and won it back. But what that meant was for about 10 years, people didn't trust the Oval as a place for renting it for a whole season. So in that time, boxing, Gene Tunney fought and won twice there. Sixto Escobar. Cricket was the most attended sport in 1930. George Headley is in the in the ICC Cricket Hall of Fame. He played there. Soccer, including the Bronx Workers Communist Soccer Team in first place. Speed skating. Only in winter, of course. What?
That rise in the back.
This is from Central Park. Garment District Baseball, the French Couture Baseball League. Who would have thought it? Here we can see that there's a baseball game between the Châtillon Haute Couture and the Descours Rodier tomorrow at the Dyckman Oval. And here there's Rodier and Descours. Everybody loves baseball. This is really interesting. Music publishers versus the actors at the Dyckman Oval. But this guy, Joe Schenck, started out owning a ride at the amusement park atop Fort George. Joseph Schenck parlayed all that experience in entertainment into becoming president of United Artists and founding 20th Century Fox, or what 20th Century Pictures, which later merged with Fox, and became one of the biggest movie executives ever. And here he is playing a piano at the Dyckman Oval between innings. Motorcycle racing, daredevils, and a circus. And this is for you, Pete Ostrander, the New York Giants training camp at the Dyckman Oval. 1930, the New York Football Giants with two football Hall of Famers, Steve Owen and Benny Friedman. Here's the football starts training. 26 members of the New York Football Giants reported to Coach Roy Andrews at Dyckman Oval yesterday afternoon to begin intensive training for the opening of the National Football League. And the Brown Bombers. This team is worth a presentation of its own. For 3 seasons, they played at the Dyckman Oval as their home stadium. Fritz Pollard was a running back for Brown during the 1916 Rose Bowl. And he played in the inaugural year of the NFL for the Akron Pros in 1920. In 21, he became Akron's player coach, became the head coach, the very first African-American head coach in NFL history. It wasn't until 1989 that Art Shell of the Oakland Raiders became the NFL's second head coach. And at the time, people thought that he was the first, but Pollard was the first. And so baseball was integrated until 1933. From 1933 to 1946, there were no black players in the NFL, and it was teams like this that provided work for these professionals who were suddenly out of work. And this one last thing, Small's Paradise, the Harlem Music Bar, has its company picnic at Dyckman Oval. And in that oval, Bill Bojangles, Mr. Bojangles Robinson, he specialized in this, racing backwards against people who were racing forwards. And here we can see him later in San Francisco doing it. He would challenge people and bet people, I bet I can beat you running backwards. I could run faster than you can running forwards. And he would do it. And so here we can see Bill Bojangles Robinson, star of Blackbirds. He was the winner in one of the featured events of the meet when he ran backwards 757 yards, faster than half a dozen waiters could run 100 yards the orthodox way. All right, but let's get back to our baseball. So part 2 of baseball starts with different teams. This is the last 4 or 5 years of the Oval, and the Black Yankees, a new Negro National League team, begin their season with Dyckman Oval as the home field. And they were training up at Baker Field first with Columbia University's football team. And in June, they quit the Oval because they thought that Oval management was cheating them out of gate receipts. So this was after Satchel Paige probably heard of him, had struck out 13, and Josh Gibson went 5 for 5 at the Oval. These are two of the top Hall of Famers ever. And the article in New York Age says that the straw that broke the camel's back was a report that the ticket salesman, the white ticket salesman on Sunday, in which it was stated that net attendance was only 1,200 people when the ballpark was filled and the players had been told that the seating capacity was 2,500. They were being told, oh, you can only get paid for 1,200 people. So they said, well, then we're out of here. And so after half a season, the Black Yanks quit the Oval, and kind of a lonely looking Academy Street there. It is still prohibition, however. So why is there a beer garden here? Might be a speakeasy, or maybe they're just anticipating repeal, which was happening later that year. So here we can see the Oval with the city all around it now in 1934. So the final part of the story is ready to begin. In 1935, Alex Pompez, who we saw back in like 1919 with his Cuban stars, he has plans. He wanted to join the second iteration of the Negro National League in 1934, but because he didn't have a home field, his approval was nixed. So he went back, and also Nat Strong, who we heard about, he was against adding another team, diluting his earnings. So the Black Yankees went to Dyckman Oval as home grounds and met failure. The stands were not in great shape. The field was not in great shape. So Alex Pompez, who owned a numbers game in Harlem, called for the creation of a real team, which would more than hold its own, and the building of a real baseball park at Dyckman Oval. He wanted to build all new stands. He wanted to increase the size of the field. And Nat Strong, who booked the independent and semi-pro games, he does not want Pompez in. But everyone else wanted Pompez in, and the coming of Alejandro Pompez into baseball again will be a boom for the game in Manhattan, and his occupancy of an enlarged Dyckman Oval will bring major baseball within 12 miles of Harlem. So the pressure was really from one guy. It was from Nat Strong. Everyone else wanted Pompez in. And truth is sometimes stranger than fiction. Right? A couple of days before the vote was taken, Nat Strong had a heart attack and dies. His sudden passing on January 10th cleared the way for Alex Pompez's New York Cubans to join the Negro National League and open up ball fields all over the place. So NNL votes yes, brings Pompez aboard. He boasts that he's going to spend $35,000, that's 1935 money, to make New York baseball conscious as far as Negro baseball is concerned. He's going to invest it in the stadium. He has engineers and architects looking over Dyckman Oval with an eye towards improving it, enlarging the seating capacity to 12,000, and improving the playing field and players' accommodations, and enlarging the playing field. The blue was the original dimensions until 1934. We know there's a short porch for sure. So there was one lot of land in left field and a lot of land out in center that he acquired leases for. So he increased the field actually considerably. And here he talks about a field being made over and steamrolled. It looks like one of the big league diamonds. Fans are not going to recognize it. New style seats have been installed. A new cover has been placed for a shade over the grandstand. Box seats have been put in. There is no comfort the fans can crave that has been left undone. And let's compare the two ball fields. Now we've got a center field of 318 feet. It's still a lot shorter than the Yankee field, but that is another 50, 60 feet longer. So some balls are going to drop in and not be out of the park. And the capacity has been like 4 or 5 times greater. Here's the 1935 roster at spring training in Jacksonville, Florida. And floodlights. Pompez installed floodlights for night games. These weren't the first night games in New York City, but they were the first in Manhattan. And on opening day, the Cubans lose both games. Oh, how deflating must that have been. The stands were packed to overflowing. The crowd numbered no less than 10,000. Subway Series in June against the Brooklyn Eagles and their manager, Effa Manley, who is the only woman in the Hall of Fame. Split a doubleheader at Dyckman Oval in the afternoon, so they each won a game. Somebody sent me this scorecard a couple years ago from a New York Cubans Brooklyn Eagles game. So this is just, ephemeral like this is really, really, I think it's even got Bill Robinson's autograph on it. Really rare, really rare. I spent a lot of time looking through photos at the Hall of Fame in their library, not at, their digital library, looking for photos that might have been taken at the Oval. And here's one of Clarence Fats Jenkins and left fielder Bill Yancey at the Oval, because this building, 541 to 551 West 204th Street, is beyond the left field wall, and it's right there. So there's the left field line. And they started to acquire a nickname, because most of this team, the New York Cubans, the name of the team, Cubans, most of these guys were Hispanic and from, let's see, well, they got this nickname, the Latins from Manhattan. And that sort of became their calling card, the New York Cubans, the Latins from Manhattan. Here they are playing 1935 Homestead Grays with a couple of Hall of Famers there, Ray Brown and Buck Leonard. 6,000 fans come to see the Chicago American Giants and New York Cubans divide a doubleheader in July of 1935. They were completely outclassed by Martin Dihigo and his Latins from Manhattan. Dihigo is a player manager, not the owner. And they vied with the Pittsburgh Crawfords for the 1935 title, the World Series. The 1935 Negro National League World Series was played between the Pittsburgh team and this New York team at Dyckman Oval. So games 1 and 3 were at the Oval. New York won games 1, 2, and 4 and really came so close to being champs. And we've got 6 Hall of Famers, 5 of them playing. This is a dense slide, but it's game 1, game 2, game 3. And so you can see the attendance and the scores. Crawfords lose. Crawfords lose again. Crawfords win. And then on the off day, the New York Cubans play a different team to fill in the week. Then the Cubans defeat the Crawfords again. So they're up 3-1, and then the Crawfords start to crawl their way back until they win. And then the Crawfords come back from being down and win the World Series in Philadelphia. And then they play a bonus game at Yankee Stadium on September 22nd with 25,000 people. So I guess, let's just read this. So this is the game 6. This is where it fell apart for the Cubans. The game's tied 2-2 in the 4th. Johnny Taylor comes in to pitch. He allows a run. After 7 innings, the Cubans lead at 6-3. Alex Pompez leaves the ballpark to prepare a victory party. You never do that before the game's over. It was still 6-3 in the bottom of the 8th when Martin Dihigo, the player coach for the Cubans, says to Johnny Taylor, "Give me the ball. I want to finish the game." He wants to be on the mound when they win the championship. Dihigo got through the bottom of the 8th, and in the bottom of the 9th, he got 2 people out. So it's 2 out in the bottom of the 9th, 1 more out, and the New York Cubans win the World Series. But he walks Chester Williams, and then Josh Gibson singles, and then Oscar Charleston smashed a game-tying 3-run homer. Then Bill Patterson doubles, Judy Johnson smokes a ball and scores Thomas and scores Patterson, and they win the game 7-6. and they're not out of it. Pittsburgh's not out of it. So in the clubhouse, they just finished counting out the championship bonuses to the Cubans players, and he heard the crowd roar. They had scored 4 runs in the bottom of the ninth and won the game. In game 7, the Cubans rallied in the ninth, but came up a run short, and Tahigo quit afterwards, but was back at the helm the next year. Here are the 6 Hall of Famers who played in those games, game 6, and a 6th one was in the clubhouse getting ready for a celebration. What are you doing, Alex? Okay. So there's the winning team, not the Dyckman Oval team. That's the Crawfords. And they repeated in 1936, but Cubans returned to the Oval and were feted by a crowd. And they had a party anyway, they still made it all the way. Just that one last little extra inch. Here's the post-series banquet, probably at the Oval. And at the end of the season, Babe Ruth comes for his 3rd and last time. This is 15 years after he'd been there, right after his first season. This is his final appearance at Dyckman Oval and his first appearance in New York since retiring earlier that year. And he was a ghost of his previous skill level. Without Ruth, the chumps, stars, were like bread without yeast, says the New York Amsterdam News. The umpire called a halt to the slaughter in the name of humanity. The umpire did stop the game, but it was because of darkness. The so-called, and here's something from the New York Amsterdam News. This is a sports opinion piece. So-called semi-pro and minor league white ball tossers have absolutely no business in the same town with the top flight Negro leagues, to say nothing of in the same ball yard at the same time. So he's saying Babe Ruth's team was outclassed. Babe Ruth, his career was over as a big leaguer. Strike 3. But what a run he had at the Oval. And he had a very entertaining batting practice. Johnny Taylor, in the Sabre Journal, number 16, Dyckman had a short porch, and Babe Ruth skied them out of there. So he may not have had his abilities, but he sure was able to entertain the crowd. So 1935, 1936, here's the Oval looking from the 1 train. 1936 is going to be an abbreviated season for the Cubans, but they're going to start their season. Great Buck Leonard shot. I wish I had a better resolution one. I'm going to look for that. 1936 Black Yankees defeat the Cubans in the season's last baseball game. And in 1937, the Black Yankees once come back to Dyckman Oval as their home, with James Semler and Bill Robinson as owners. Bill Robinson was in a lot of Shirley Temple movies. You can see in the lower right. This was the season that Alex Pompez got in trouble with the law, as Thomas Dewey, the New York City district attorney, started cracking down on numbers games and betting. So Pompez was barely warned and escaped to Mexico City to avoid arrest on a corruption charge. He fought extradition, but he did come back to testify because he had been working for a mobster, Dutch Schultz. Dutch Schultz had pretty much told Pompez that Pompez was working for him, and just kind of elbowed his way into Pompez's business. He was forced to join up with Dutch in 1932, and that led to Pompez's indictment. He fled to Mexico. His team stopped. He returned later that year as a government witness and served probation after testifying. Pompez earned a reputation as the only person to successfully testify against the mob and not be rubbed out for it. But that meant that Dyckman Oval was the home stadium for just the Black Yankees. The Cuban team is disbanded because of Pompez's legal troubles. And they played a good season of baseball. Probably the last game at the Dyckman Oval in 1937, September 8th, the Black Yanks beat the Washington Elite Giants. Biz Mackey was on that team. This is probably the end of baseball for Dyckman Oval. This is the last photo of the Dyckman Oval from 1937. We can actually see it has been set up for football. That would have been for the Fritz Pollard's Brown Bombers. And in 1938, workmen commenced the destruction of the Dyckman Oval. Why? The owners had other things in mind for it. Who knows? But the famous Dyckman Oval set to be torn down, says the California Eagle. And various obituaries for the ballpark. Dyckman Oval has been turned down, says the February 19th, 1938 Chicago Defender. April 2nd, 1938, William Clark says, I found the Dyckman Oval completely demolished, and tributes to Pompez, tributes to all the teams. William Clark says their lease had expired, the stands were demolished, and the property taken over for other purposes. Like this, geez, what a waste. Dyckman Oval becomes a World War II parking lot. I don't know. That's a kind of a graveyard in more than one way. Bottom of the ninth, in 1948, New York City condemned the property so that it could build public housing on the site. Dyckman houses completed in 1951. The old Dyckman Oval is at the northern part of the complex. Today, Dyckman Park continues with its annual basketball tournament, which is a huge tournament. And the Dyckman Public Housing was the childhood home of Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Seen there in front of the Dyckman houses in 1959. So the last thing we're doing tonight is going to try and find home plate. We're going to use georeferencing to do it. Here's our footprint, Nagle Avenue, Academy Street, 10th Avenue. And so here's our Dyckman Oval on the Bromley 1930 plate. We're going to just superimpose other land atlases on top of this footprint. And here by overlaying the 1935 Sanborn plate, it actually shows the grandstand, which is very useful. So we're just, since this is a nice, unique sort of shape, trapezoid or whatever. There's the changing rooms, the grandstand. So home plate is going to be somewhere out here. Overlaying it from the 1955 Bromley, that same block. Now we can put it in context with what's there now. Parking lot, and part of the original sidewalk has been turned into a parking lot. So the grandstands are sort of in this parking area now. This is a playground now where the Dyckman basketball happens. Now we'll go to an aerial photo. This is also, the purpose of this is so that you or me can walk to this site and estimate where the infield was. So here it is in 2020. Now we'll estimate our infield, and that gives us a place to go to imagine maybe where home plate, third base, second base, first base might be. Maybe the pitcher's mound, the question mark. And so there is something that we can do. We can try to first overlay, imagine what it looks like. Now, the thing I tried to keep the same was the Nagle and Academy street sign. That was in both pictures. And this. So there's no sign that anything ever existed there.
That's what I was thinking. There's no marker on the playground.
There's no historical marker anywhere. So in a couple years ago, some friends and I used all these maps to try and some stickball bases and a long measuring tape and tried to measure out where those bases might be. And so home plate in the parking lot with no marker of history. Third base, pitcher's mound is at least on grass. First base is on grass, second base is on grass, third base is in the parking lot, and home plate's in the parking lot. Imagine that. And that's all you can do is imagine it, because there's no way of, there's nothing there to say that it actually was there. And that's where we're ending tonight.